afternoon.
We're back. We're back.
We're back. They can't hold us down for too long, don't you worry, Steve. Welcome to Personality, the show which is all about all things personality and how to apply it to your world. My name is Becky, and I am here with the Jedi Master himself, Mr. Steve Cockram. Hi, Steve. How are you doing today?
I'm doing very well, thank you. Yes, coming to you live from Tatooine.
What's the weather like over in Tatooine?
It's very like England, very like England, sort of muggy, cold, you know, sort of with a bit of fog. Although actually it's clearing here at the moment, so maybe that's progress being made.
It was really misty earlier on today. Totally couldn't see anything. Sorry, we're Brits and we're already talking about the weather. We should move on. What else has been going on in the life of Steve over the past couple of weeks?
Oh, don't you worry. Don't worry about weather, by the way. Americans love weather more than the Brits. When we lived in America, we learned the whole geography of America by just watching the Weather Channel. They've got something called Storm Chasers, which was one of our favorite films with the kids, because like only Americans would go out in a hurricane and try and sort of broadcast live from the middle of a tornado in the middle of Oklahoma, whatever it was. But in terms of geography and in terms of weather, Americans is much more interesting because ours is, of course, a maritime climate, which means it just comes off the water. Theirs comes over land, which means you get a lot more exotic things. So typical Americans, far more exotic than us Brits, even with the weather.
We're just cold and wet all the time. It's just rainy. The real question is, what level's the rain? Yeah. The other question is, Steve, is are you ready for Christmas? 2 weeks today, it's Christmas Day. Have you got all your presents?
Well, there's a royal we, am I ready for Christmas? That probably needs Mrs. Cockram to answer that question. But have I bought Mrs. Cockram's Christmas presents this year already? The answer is yes. So for the first time in living memory, I had them ordered before the end of November. Now, before you get too ready to jump and cheer at my growth and emotional maturity, Helen did send me a list of things she wanted. So all I did was had to go on Amazon, order them, and make sure they arrived on time. So, yeah, I will wrap them at some point, but that probably will be Christmas Eve, very, very late in the evening. So, you know, get the true spirit of Christmas.
I have to say, it's a true pioneer. I've actually beaten you because I've wrapped all of Tim's Christmas presents already. What can I say? It's ENTP efficiency right there.
You win. You win.
Thanks. So today we are talking about connectors and specifically how they can increase their influence. So as we go through, I'm going to post some questions to Yoda. You know the drill. But if you have any questions around influence or anything related to it, please do post those in the chat box, and we will pitch those to Yoda himself. So, Steve, we've been talking all around the influence model and how different voices can overcome different barriers within that. So the first question I have for you is, how do connectors overcome their walls of self-preservation? Sorry, no, that's not the first question. This is the first question. So Friday afternoon, can you tell? What are the barriers to establishing trust?
Don't make excuses,
right after I've been talking about my efficiency as well. What are the barriers to establishing trust for connectors?
Fantastic. So you put up the visual Bex, giant, everything in the new world is visual, interactive with immediate application. So this is a visual you'll have seen before, hopefully, and really it's the best way I know of understanding how influence is both won and how influence is lost. So if you look at the model, when you meet somebody, remember the first 90 seconds, 90% of first impressions are made in the first 90 seconds of meeting somebody. And whenever anybody meets you, they are really unlocking 4 sequential filters to actually ask the question, do I trust you? And those are character, chemistry, competence, credibility. And you by now should know, or if you haven't, go and listen on Giant TV to the video or any of our past live streams, the character is really, do I trust you? Are you a person of integrity? Is that something where you're more for me than you're for yourself? That's what character is filter. The chemistry is, do I like you? Do I connect with you? Do I enjoy spending time with you? Competency is, are you competent? Are you confident in your competence? And do you have a proven track record of success you're prepared to boast about a little? And then credibility is, do you have the ability to take your competency, but actually listen well enough to the specific needs of the person you're talking to basically take your competence and apply it in a credibly relevant way to the specific needs of the person that you're dealing with. So if you think of the old bike lock, or think of your old locker when you're at school, think of those little dials with the numbers. You have to line up all four before trust opens. And that's why in this series, we've been looking for different foundational voices. What is it they have to worry about? Where is it to establishing trust? Now, the connectors, okay, so connectors, you know who you are, ENFPs, ENFJs of this world. You are at a huge advantage. And I know right now you're rejoicing about that, because every connector I know lights up all four of those filters almost without thinking about it. It's the only foundational voice that actually starts with literally all of the numbers aligned. Connectors have this unbelievable capacity to connect with people and establish what almost appears to be accelerated trust. Jeremy, you'll have listened to on other live streams, or the one I'll do later with him as founder. Jeremy is the ultimate captain connector, and he'll often come off an airplane, phone me up and go, Steve, you never guess what happened on my airplane journey. And I'm going like, well, I know connectors like to tell their stories. So I'll say, no, Jeremy, I have no idea. Why don't you tell me? And Jeremy then goes, well, I got on, I sat next to this person. I kind of got talking to them. I got out the giant toolkit. I'm able to help them make a breakthrough in their lives. They cried, and we've got a new client. And in the old days, I just used to think, how on the earth do you do that? I mean, why is it that doesn't happen to me? I usually get on a plane, put my headphones in, hopefully not have to speak to the person next to me, because it's going to be fifth gear in the zone, cranking out the work I need. Connectors connect at a heart and head level almost immediately with most people. There is something about them which disarms people. And so therefore, every connector I know has accelerated trust in a way that I am jealous about. So when it comes to transactions, the reason why connectors are usually so good at selling things, even though, of course, they're never selling things in their opinion, they're simply connecting people to opportunities and relationships that are going to be good for them. Every connector I know finds it easier to go from trust to transaction than any other foundational voice. So the first answer to your question, Bex, really is there are no barriers to establishing trust for a connector in the beginning of that relationship.
Good time to be alive for connectors, hey?
It is. I'm always very jealous of connectors.
So no barrier, at least in the first instance.
The only thing, I mean, if you really want to push me for kind of, that's my 1.0 answer. 1.2 answer is, if they're not careful, connectors will almost always start with character and chemistry. So they'll almost always start in the relational space. So one of the things that can often go, people go, oh, I'm not sure, is if you have very strong, rational, logical, strategic processes, so your guardians, your pioneers, your creative pioneers, who usually aren't interested in whether we're going to become great friends until they're absolutely sure you're competent and your competence is credibly relevant in their world. So that's one that the connector can often go, oh, the first 90 seconds might not be the home run. But connectors have this incredible ability somehow to navigate and nuance and read the person they're with. And even if they start off wrong, it isn't necessarily a kind of a final blow. They will find a way to go, without necessarily knowing how to use this vocabulary language, they will find a way to establish trust and a place where relationship and basically transaction can happen. That's why they're so good at selling things, because a transaction is based on trust. And connectors find a way to make it feel like they've got the perfect solution, the perfect moment in your life. And of course you trust them, because why wouldn't you?
Yeah, wow. Yeah, it's true. Being on the other side of connector, we're drawn into their world. It's amazing. Okay, so if there are barriers to establishing trust for connectors, let's move to the next question in terms of how they overcome their wall of self-preservation.
So I want to go, maybe I'll put in another question rather than play by the rules, because though connectors establish trust very easily, the question that I'm going to ask myself is, why do connectors sometimes lose that trust over a period of time? And that's the question I'm going to assume you've asked me, and then I'm going to come on to this one. So just so you know.
So in terms of losing trust, is that losing trust over a period of time, or is that losing influence and impact once they've overcome their wall of self-preservation?
It's a very good question. I think that for some people is that they will often oversell in the promise of winning the trust and transaction. So that's a barrier. I think in the end, the ones that I will say about self-preservation is because a lot of connectors will often think that the wall of self-preservation doesn't exist from their side. So that's a different issue. But the thing I want to just major on for a little bit is to say, if you look at a connector over time, the advantage connectors have is they establish trust so quickly and it's theirs to lose. But sadly, so many connectors over time lose trust and they lose relational influence with people. And it's almost always because in the end, they overpromise and underdeliver. And that's one of those things where the connector is so keen for you to believe that they're the right thing, and it usually is. We often say is that the connector will often sell at 125% of reality. What that means is I would have probably bought what they were selling and trusted them if they'd sold it at 100% or even 95% of what the solution was going to be. But sometimes the danger for the connectors are they oversell and they overpromise. And when they underdeliver, people begin to ask the question, okay, do I trust you? I like you. I know you mean well. I know your heart's in the right place. But ultimately, can I trust you to deliver on your promises under pressure when I need you to? So that's the bit where, if you're not careful, connectors undermine their influence from the beginning because they set up an unrealistic expectation in the life of the client or the life of the relationship or the friendship. And whereas everyone else would have been happy with 95%, the overselling means you told me it'd be 125%. It ends up being 100%, but now next time round, I'm going, when you say, I will deliver this, I will deliver that. There's always this beginning of a nagging doubt. I know you want that to be true, but actually, am I prepared to trust that that promise, that commitment will actually be met long term? And that's one of those things which that's a tendency of a connector. It doesn't have to be their action. Just remember, connectors, next time you're overselling, almost overselling to try and win that trust and transaction, what you're doing is you didn't need to promise 125%. 100% would have been good enough because you're actually better off under promising and over delivering. You have so much relational trust in the beginning, people will still go with you. You don't need to do that. So that's, I would say, if you're going to listen to one thing today, connectors, or if you're coaching connectors, or if you have connectors who are children, teaching them how to be precise with the truth is, I would say, one of the most precious gifts and the most important tendency skill sets for connectors to learn. Learn to make sure that you are being factual when you promise, and you are being careful that you don't promise something you can't actually deliver.
So in summary, there's a tendency for, I guess, exaggeration and slight over embellishment of the facts sometimes. Okay.
I need to use words like that, because what I don't want is every connector will get defensive if they hear this. This is not a character. It is a character issue, but it's not an intentional one. So they are not deliberately being misleading. Their desire to please people because they know that the solution they have is exactly what that person needs. In their desire to persuade them to have the thing that they know is going to be so good for them, that they actually overemphasize and overpressure the sale, because they just go, I can't bear the thought of that person not being connected to so-and-so, or not having that opportunity, or not having that product. So I want to be very careful with vocabulary, because this is not an intentional action. They are not manipulators. They are not economical with the truth. They are not, in some ways, spinning, though it sometimes can appear that way as we go further on. But we'll come to that in a moment. So does that kind of make sense to you, Rex? Yeah,
absolutely. And you mentioned briefly that connectors don't have a wall of self-preservation. Can you expand slightly on that one?
Yeah, so if the question you're asking now is, how do they overcome their wall of self-preservation? Very easily, I would say. Most connectors have very little wall of self-preservation, which is why they have hundreds of close, dear, and very best friends. Because for a connector, what you see is what you get. Usually, if they're with you, they are being with you because they want to be with you. They want to help you. They want to help you be the best you can be. Doing that, they fulfill themselves. So usually their wall of self-preservation at the beginning of a relationship is very, very low because they want to help you. They've already made that decision. The challenge sometimes for the connector is to assume that the person on the other side of them also has no wall of self-preservation. And for other voices, that's just not true. There are certain things which actually you have to go slowly. So even when you have trust, even when you're beginning a relationship, you'll often find that connectors almost go too far too soon in asking the other person to open up about maybe the deep and the personal things of their lives. So in our world with consulting, the connector is easily able to establish that foundational trust, and they're easily able to begin that working relationship. They're usually great fun to be with. They're very, very skilled at what they do. Everyone loves them. But that doesn't automatically mean that I want to talk to you about my marriage, about the way I run my kids, or maybe my personal besetting sins that I struggle with a lot. So with a connector, usually if you ask them the right questions, they'll tell you anything pretty much you want to know. So for connectors, you have to understand that not everyone's wall of self-preservation comes down as quickly as yours. And that's one of those places, Bex, where if they're not careful connectors, they can begin to lose influence because they're in many ways ahead of the relational influence and impact that the other person is allowing them to have. Now, when they're with other connectors, it just, there are no walls. They're off and running. They're best friends and good to go. But it's always good as a connector to ask the question, has the other person had time to lower their wall of self-preservation and to actually recognize that once you're in that relationship space, it will often take time, particularly if you're dealing with people whose voices are more conservative than yours. So first voice guardians, first voice nurturers. Don't be in a hurry, connectors, to close every part of that influence, because as you win influence through serving them in their presenting issue that they trusted you for, usually for a work context, usually over time, as you prove yourself consistent, reliable, you'll find that basically 6 months in, then you have influence to be able to speak into any area of their lives. But that's one of those danger signs. That's why the traffic lights are on the influence model, by the way, because it may be the light is always green for a connector on their side, but the light may only be yellow or amber for the person you're working with. And it doesn't mean you undermine influence. It just means sometimes that they kind of go backwards in the depth of relationship in order to move forwards again. So does that make sense, Bex?
Yeah, that is so good. And yeah, particularly around one of my aha moments, particularly around the revelation with other voices, in terms of, they will often take them longer to take down the walls of self-preservation. What happens when connectors meet other connectors? I imagine that's kind of like a firework of just like connection and influence right there. Because if both of their walls are so low, they both come straight through. That's like, best friends for life.
Well, if you think about it, we all have self-preservation to some degree. So if you think of those 3 questions, if I put up the next slide here, if I can work out how I get out of my slide here, I've got to go back into this one. Am I? No, I've got to go back into this one and then that one. So I'm hoping that worked. Did it?
Yeah.
Let's have a look.
Yeah.
So remember, the wall of self-preservation for both sides of the relationship and influence are, what am I afraid of losing? What am I trying to hide? What am I trying to prove, and to whom? So you'll usually find with your connectors that they're probably all of these alive. Less so too. What am I afraid of losing? Is usually it's losing that sense of, well, I don't want to lose the relationship I now have. But the biggest issue for most connectors is number 3, because it's what am I trying to prove and to whom? So for whatever reason, most connectors, they love people and they love to be loved. And they're trying to prove often that they're competent enough to play with the people who fundamentally define themselves through their task achievement. So one of the challenges for connectors is sometimes to act like you belong, not to be trying to prove yourself. There's nothing worse than people trying to prove themselves, because it shows you that they're actually quite insecure. So recognize, connectors, your skills are unbelievable. The new world where EQ is more valuable than IQ, ultimately, you have the opportunity to have a level of relationship, influence, and impact which is higher, I think, faster than any of the other foundational voices. But you've got to be good with actually not trying to prove it too quickly, and in many ways allow people to go at the speed they're comfortable going at, because this is your sweet spot. This is the place where ultimately the connector, if they play well and if they don't oversell, under promise and over deliver, then actually the world is truly yours. Now, the other one I'd say, Bex, is this, is when any personality comes under pressure, different tendencies come to the fore. So if you put a connector under pressure, or you start to challenge them, most connectors are not good at receiving challenge. They can become quite defensive, and they're very good at firing back with their cyber warfare. But under real pressure, what you'll find are connectors tend to overshare, overpromise, and overspin. So listen, connectors, I love you. That's not what you have to do, but it's always good to know what your tendencies are. So under pressure, where you're trying to prove yourself, you will often overshare, over-exaggerate, overpromise, and ultimately overspin, not because you think you're doing it, but because as part of that trying to prove you belong and trying to prove that actually somehow that you are the real deal. So I've seen it again and again, and I almost grab them and I go, you don't have anything to prove, nothing to lose, nothing to hide. Everybody loves being around you. There's nowhere more fun than being with a connector, but ultimately relax. You don't have to be the center of everything. We love you. Just be careful. Pressure, overshare, overspin, over-exaggerate, and overpromise. Those are the 4 kryptonite tendencies of our connector friends. So if it feels like I'm being harsh on you, it's because I love you so much, and it pains me at times when I watch some of the connectors I know and love in the world undermine their influence, because in the end, people begin to question character. Nothing is more unfair, by the way, but that's what begins to happen. People go, I'm not sure I can trust you. I'm not sure you're always telling me the whole truth in your insecurity. I'm not sure that your promises are actually bankable. And I'm just not sure if it's you're spinning your version of the truth as you perceive it versus the reality as I know it. So there we go. That's probably a little bit harsh in health warnings, but if connectors are going to come back and be brave enough to listen to this, I want them to have the best I can give them about how they keep that influence, which is a gift to them, and how they keep it long term, because that's always the challenge.
Yeah, we've got some great comments. So Jeff says, as a connector, there's the piercing truth. I feel like I resonate with that. And I've also got a question as well from Joanne. So Joanne asks, as a first voice connector, can the overselling be their passion? If so, how should you balance a passion with the competency and credibility?
Well, so thank you, connectors, for the feedback. It's appreciated to know it's useful. So Joanne, in the end, what I say to connectors is you're not salespeople. So connectors are never selling anything. What they're doing is they're connecting people they care about or clients they care about to products, opportunities, and relationships that are going to help them win. So get your head around the idea that you as a connector at your best are always scanning the world for who are the people, where are the networks, where's the opportunities, where's the products that I can store away over here in my connector database. Because when I meet somebody on an airplane called Steve, I'm not going to sell him anything. I'm going to connect him with a person, an opportunity, a product, which is going to help him win. So the thing, Joanne, to understand is just because character is sometimes the long-term barrier, when you are with somebody in that initial moment, you manage to combine character, chemistry, competence, and credibility, because the connector is already sold on the product or the relationship they're connecting. That's why you sound so plausible in that. So don't worry about overselling. Think about yourself as over connecting. And the bit I said earlier, which is just be careful that you only sell or connect at 100% of what can actually be delivered. One of the disciplines I often coach connectors on is actually offering 90% of the solution they believe they can give even though it feels deeply disturbing for them in the present. Then when they come back with 100%, the person goes, oh my goodness, you've done even more than I imagined, versus, well, you kind of said it was going to be like this, and it's good, but it's not quite as good as you were telling me it would be. So that's the fine line. But I don't want to squash, Joe, this incredible ability to be passionate about people, opportunities, relationships, networks, products that every connector who's fully alive carries with them wherever they go. And that's why COVID's been, I think it'd be interesting to hear from you both, actually, that COVID has been such a difficult time for connectors, because the place they get all their connector data, the place they get their database of all the things I just talked about, is because they're constantly engaging with the external world to get feedback from people, the people they're talking to, the products they're watching, the things they're reading. Every connector at their best is always storing ideas, people, relationships, networks, products, opportunities for when they meet the right person. So they're a bit like their very own dating agency for those things. It's like, I have all these things, I meet Becky, Becky's got this problem, she needs this, I'm going to connect you to this product, or I'm going to recommend this, or I'm going to do X or Y. So, you know, it's not quite swipe right, but connectors at their best are usually an incredible repository of all of those things in their stored away, trusted database. And of course, every connector knows that they wouldn't connect anyone with anything or anyone or any opportunity if it wasn't 100% guaranteed to be successful. So you can often offend a connector by challenging what they're saying, as almost as if you doubt them is to doubt their integrity, which is not what we're doing. So come back to us, Joanne, come back to us, Jeff. Any of that sound true?
I love it. Whilst they're coming back to us, so if you are not a first voice connector, but you know a first voice connector, or they're in your world, you might be married to one, it might be your boss, might be your colleague or your children, how do you help them increase their influence?
First thing you do is you say, I've got an amazing program that I watched as a live stream and that will be recorded for posterity, where Ray and Personality Yoda basically did an expose on everything you need to know about the connector first voice, but probably are not able to challenge your partner or spouse on, or child on. So the thing you have to remember is connectors are always sensitive to criticism, even if it's not criticism. So if you're a guardian, a pioneer, or a creative pioneer, and your default communication code is critique, even when you think you're being collaborative, the connector can often be defensive. So when you think about how am I going to help them grow, you have to think very carefully about how am I going to position the opportunity for growth for them. And what you need to be able to position it as is, do you know I'm for you? And connectors like, I do. Are you open to me helping you be even more effective at what you do? So you have to effectively earn the permission to bring maybe some insight of going, I'm noticing, and this is me giving it to you as feedback, take it away. I see the influence you have so quickly, but I'm watching you potentially undermine your influence in certain relationships or certain situations. And I just want to protect you and at least give you a chance to respond. You can't be responsible for the connector's response. Sometimes they won't be in a position to receive it, which is why using Giant, the platform and the teaching there, in theory is a way of doing that. But if they are open, sometimes just remembering those 4 things I told you and go, do you know, isn't it interesting the tendency of a connector when they feel under pressure, under stress, or things are not going exactly how they would want them to go, they overshare, they overpromise, they over-exaggerate, and they overspin. Those are the 4 tendencies that are kryptonites to the influence of connectors. So, you know, that's what I show them. I'd use the tool, I'd teach them as best I can, and I'd ask them whether any of this makes sense to them, give them a chance to engage in it, because they need to feel it's something you're doing with them, not something you're trying to do to them.
Yeah, I love it. I absolutely love it. That's so helpful. And Jeff says, absolutely. He completely agrees.
Thanks, Jeff. I really appreciate it. In some ways, you know, as you know, as a pioneer connector myself, I carry the I carry the capacity to spin, but the ability to do it with a grenade launcher as well is a particularly profound. So the more we know ourselves, the more we can lead ourselves. And that's really what all this is about. Every single leader in the world, every single person who's watching this, and every single person you know, we all have barriers to influence, let alone keeping it. And we all have a wall of self-preservation that we just have to keep being honest about and being real. And, you know, if you've got good friends and they know these tools, it's a great discipline to every now and again just go through and go, okay, what am I trying to hide? What am I trying to prove to whom? What am I afraid of losing? Because in every one of us at any given moment, there will always be one at least of those things threatening to undermine or put up that wall of influence, self-preservation, which means we don't live into fully the opportunity that we've been given. And I would say to people in the, you know, in the world, you know, when you're at the trust transaction level, and you know when you're at the relationship depth, influence, and impact level. How do you know? Well, usually it's, are you an easily expendable budget item when COVID hits? You'll find that anybody who's an external consultant client can basically be removed when you're cutting costs. When you are involved in a depth relationship with somebody, when you are actually inside their walls of self-preservation, when you are a confidant and a trusted friend who's helping them with their world, they don't see you in the same way. So that's another great lens to look at as a connector. Once you're in there, don't lose that. Don't squander it. Work hard on making sure that when the pressure comes on, you deal with your over tendencies and you choose a different action.
You mentioned briefly there around if it's your second voice, do the tendency, so if you have connect with a second voice, do the tendencies still apply in terms of unlocking influence, or is that slightly different?
I think the foundational voice is the one that defines the barriers to influence. I think there are nuances which probably can't go into here. I think it's easier at this point, Bex, to be able to just go, if you know what your first voice is, your foundational voice, it shapes how all the others are heard and experienced. So I am a pioneer connector like you, but when we meet a first voice connector, the issues are not the same. Mm-hmm. If you think about it, interestingly, our barrier to relational trust as a pioneer is the same. So character is the issue, but for a completely different reason that it is for the connector. So this is one of those few things with influence where actually the foundational voice, if you can learn what you need to know for yourself, but also what you need to know for those you lead or those you mentor or those you live with, let alone the children you raise, then ultimately what you find is to go learning for the five. That's really as much as you need to do, because to be quite honest, you know, most of these things as a pioneer, or hopefully connectors, and Jeff is agreeing with me here, these are things that are never going to go away. It's really annoying. You never graduate the school of self-awareness. These tendencies will be hardwired into your personality and DNA for the rest of your life. You will always have to choose actions which grow influence and keep influence. The moment you're accidental, sadly, those default tendencies kick back, or the moment you are under real pressure, or things aren't going the way you want, or you're physically tired, all of those things basically mean those tendencies are more likely to become your actions, because we only usually make good choices when we're actually healthy, well, you know, we're sleeping well, and we feel good about where we are in the world. So hope that's nearly enough for connectors, Bex.
That is nearly enough for connectors. Thank you so much. That's incredible. Connectors done. So next week, we're going to be talking around pioneers specifically and how they their influence. And then the week after that, in the run up to Christmas, we are going to be talking around the last one, which is creatives. Or if you haven't covered,
we might be in our next episode, but next Friday is the our Christmas party, Bex. So unless you are planning to do it, I think we're very unlikely that we will be doing pioneers next week. So unless we're going to do it live from the Pollen Street Social in London.
I have to say, the Pollen Street Social is an amazing restaurant. When there is an opportunity, it's generally like a 4-hour kind of lunch thing. So it's praying that London doesn't go into lockdown so that it's still open. If you have any questions or any thoughts which you'd love Personality Yoda to answer, please do send them to us on that email address below, and we will be sure to pose those to Steve and get his wisdom on those. We will be back next time with the Pioneer, and then the week after that we'll be doing the Creative and how they can increase their influence. Any final words from you, Steve, before we sign off?
Yes, a final word of thanks to all those nurturers that have overcome their wall of self-preservation, reached out to me on social media and said, did you really mean I could have 20 minutes with you? And the answer has been to every single one of you, yes. Ironically, at least 3 of the people that reached out turned out they were connectors, first voice, and masquerading as a nurturer. So hear this right, this is not for guardians, it's not for connectors. I have a bias towards nurturers because somebody needs to. So if you are a nurturer first voice and you would like anything to process with me about what you've been learning about influence, whatever, reach out to me and I promise I will honor that commitment. You just got to find me on either Facebook or LinkedIn or something like that. So nurturers only connectors, by the way, just so you know. You know, go, well, I thought I'd try and get some time because it's for nurturers.
There you go, folks, an opportunity not to be missed if you are a nurturer or know one who would benefit from 20 minutes with Steve.
No, I didn't say that. They've got to find me on here.
Find him on social media. Awesome. Have a fantastic week, and we will speak to you soon with the next episode for Pioneers. Have a good time. Bye.